The life of a hero. He was a son, a husband, and a father. He was a leader of a nation, and he overcame great obstacles to achieve something that no one before him and no one after him has ever achieved. Who am I speaking of, some may wonder? I would like to tell you about the 32nd President of the United States of America, a man who overcame the paralysis of polio and went forth to win an unprecedented 4 terms as president, none other than Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Commemorating the life and accomplishments of Franklin D. Roosevelt, who is also better known by his initials FDR. He was the 32nd President of the United States, and he was one of the most well-known and most well-revered presidents in American history. His policies in regards to the Great Depression and World War II helped to motivate the nation. First, let's take a look at FDR's early life. He was born in Hyde Park, New York, to Sarah Delano and James Roosevelt on January 30th, 1882. He attended Harvard from 1900 to 1903, where he graduated with a BA degree in history. He then went on to Columbia University, where he passed the bar exam in 1907, but then decided to leave the college with no degree. On March 17, 1905, he married his 5th cousin twice removed, Anna Eleanor Roosevelt. Now let's look at how FDR's political career began. He entered politics in 1910 when he was elected to the New York State Senate as a Democrat. After supporting Woodrow Wilson's presidential candidacy, after being reelected to the State Senate in 1912, Wilson appointed FDR Assistant Secretary of the Navy in 1913. Which he held until 1920. He joined the ticket of James M. Cox as the vice president nominee in 1920, but Cox was defeated by Warren Harding. The loss prompted FDR to return to civilian life. In the summer of 1921, FDR contracted poliomyelitis while on vacation at Campolo Island in New Brunswick. Due to polio and despite his best attempts, FDR lost the use of his legs. He eventually formed a foundation at Warm Springs, Colorado to help other polio sufferers. In public, FDR wore iron braces on his hips and legs and was able to walk by swiveling his torso and leaning on a cane, but in private he always used a wheelchair. He was very careful to never be seen looking weak in public. His speeches were given when he was already standing upright, and he would have a cane or one of his sons holding him up. He believed that the American people would not support his political career if he was disabled. Now it's time for FDR to re-enter the political arena, taking baby steps to get to the top of the political world, and with the help and encouragement of his wife Eleanor, FDR was elected as the governor of New York in 1928. After he was re-elected governor in 1930, he decided to begin campaigning for the presidency. In Chicago in 1932, he won the Democratic Party nomination for president, and he decided to fly to Chicago to accept in person, which was pretty much unheard of. His campaign calling for government intervention to provide relief, recovery, and reform to the economy during what became the Great Depression helped him to defeat Herbert Hoover in the November 1932 election. Franklin Roosevelt becomes the 32nd President of the United States. But now what? The Great Depression was in full swing, but could FDR do anything to help? By the time FDR was inaugurated on March 4, 1933, the Great Depression was out of control, with unemployment at a devastating low as factories were closed, farms were foreclosed on, and even banks were failing. To help alleviate fears, FDR closed the banks for 100 days, and when they reopened, they signed into law the Glass-Steagall Act, which created the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, also known as the FDIC, which would underwrite savings deposits. He then instituted many more relief efforts, such as the Federal Emergency Relief Administration to help the unemployed, as well as the Civilian Corps, which hired 250,000 unemployed men. He worked tirelessly to give American families relief from depression and passed bill after bill to reform the economy. With one term down, what can FDR do to define his second term? His second term in office from 1937 to 1941 became a defining point of his career. In 1938, he made a statement that the U.S. would not go to war, but in September of 1939, World War II officially began when Germany invaded Poland, but still the U.S. remained neutral. While remaining neutral, Franklin signed in the Lend-Lease Act in March 1941, which allowed Wales, England, Scotland, China, and the Soviet Union to obtain military supplies from the U.S. With a second term in turmoil, FDR managed to win 55% of the popular vote and obtain an unheard of third term as president from 1941 to 1945. On December 7th, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, killing 2,403 American servicemen and civilians. With the attack on Pearl Harbor, FDR made the decision to enter the United States into the war. War strategies dominated Roosevelt's third presidential term as he worked with other leaders to solve the problem of the war. With the onslaught of declining health and stress from strategizing about the war, Roosevelt fights for an unprecedented 4th term in office. In 1944, Roosevelt went to Bethesda Hospital for testing, and was found to have high blood pressure, arteriosclerosis, coronary artery disease causing angina pectoris, along with congestive heart failure. With his health declining rapidly, FDR did all he could to hide this from the voters because he knew election time was approaching. Despite all of his personal health issues, Roosevelt and Truman were still able to win 53% of the popular vote and win the fourth term as president. As World War II begins to draw to a close, so does the life of our 32nd president. On March 1st, 1945, Roosevelt addressed Congress and for the first time ever gave his speech while sitting down. In regards, he did say that he hopes that you will pardon me for this unusual posture of sitting down during the presentation of what I want to say, but it makes it a lot easier for me to not have to carry about 10 pounds of steel around the bottom of my legs. On April 12th, Roosevelt slumped unconscious in his chair, was carried to bed where his doctor diagnosed a massive cerebral hemorrhage, and at 3:35 p.m., he passed away. Less than a month after his death, the war in Europe ended, and President Harry S. Truman dedicated the victory in Europe and all the celebrations to FDR's memory. Per his wishes, Roosevelt was buried at the Roosevelt family home, Springwood Estate in Hyde Park. FDR left a legacy during his pregnancy when he helped to form the Foundation for Infantile Paralysis, which aided in finding the vaccine for polio. You may know of this foundation better as the March of Dimes, which continues today to do work towards curing childhood diseases. Franklin Delano Roosevelt continues to be commemorated not only because he served as an unprecedented fourth presidential terms, but because he saved the United States. He saved us by ending the Great Depression and completely reviving the economy.
It's longer.